Good evening and welcome again to Public Perspective. I'm your host, Kevin McDermott. And tonight we'll be talking about something that affects all of us. It's the census. So our guest tonight, a return guest, very happy to welcome back Nathaniel George Booker.
Thank
Nathaniel,
you.
Nice to have you back.
Great to be back. Happy New Year.
Well, thank you, and to you. Last time you were here, we were talking about your role in Maywood Village Council. But this time around, we're going to talk about the census, right? And what you guys are doing to try to get more participation.
Yeah, so I'm working with the entire Proviso Township for Census 2020 awareness and outreach, and we have 14 different communities that represent the township, but in total it's over 150,000 residents that represent the census. Now, if we would have gotten our accurate count, according to the American Survey, we actually have almost 200,000 residents.
Well, where's the discrepancy come from?
Direct discrepancy is not being counted. So people who just choose not to respond to the census.
So where does the 200,000 number come from?
200,000 number comes from, so the American Survey says our participation rate for 2010 census that happened was a 76% count. Some of you do the math of, well, from a 70, what would have gotten us to a 100% count? It's almost 50,000 more people.
But how do they know that? I mean, how do they know, how does these survey takers know that only 76% were actually counted? I mean, they must have done some other counting or estimation. So
the American Survey is an ongoing. So even though the census is every 10 years, the American Survey does different tests and different walk-ups and different things at your house.
And it's done by the Census Bureau, right?
So the American Survey is an extension of the census.
Right.
So what they do is they'll look at, they know people are occupying a home. They know that there are a certain amount of children in a school system, and they'll go by that data. They'll go by that. They know that there's a certain amount of number of active electrical people, like you're receiving gas in that house, but that house wasn't counted. That house has so that it's different things that they do to judge and know that there are people living in a space that they're not being counted.
So that's interesting. Now I know, and we talked about this a little before the show, but in the last census in 2010, there was prior to that census, there was a movement to try to get statistical estimation in place because it's well known that people are not always counted in the census. And there was a lot of objection to it, a lot of resistance saying that, well, the Constitution clearly says you must physically count every person. And so it was not put in place. But what's interesting to me is the American Survey, which is run by the Census, which uses methods other than actual physically counting a person in order to come up with these numbers.
To get their count,
To get like 200,000 versus 150. And why, well, I guess it's the same reasons, but why those techniques can't be used in the census?
Well, I mean,
it's
in a perfect
politics,
world, I was going to say
right?
it's in a perfect world. I mean, the reality is the communities that are counted more benefit more. The communities that are lower counted more don't benefit as much.
And how does that work? How do the benefits flow to communities that get a better count or a higher count?
So there was a study done by George Washington Institute where it's called Counting the Dollars. And they look at over 130 different programs that go towards census funding. So the census funding counts for your education, your infrastructure, health care, social services. All of that data is looked at. So when you have communities getting newer roads than you have communities getting better alleys than you, or the school system gets more school funding. Well, it doesn't go by how many, sometimes like the funding doesn't go by how many kids are registered in the school, it'll go by how many kids were counted in that community.
During the census?
During the census. They only do the official decennial, they do the count every 10 years. So it's not always how many children are registered in your school district. Give an example, Broadview applied for some funding and they wanted to be a part of a fund program, but their census count wasn't accurate. It wasn't about how many kids were in the school district, it was about their census count being accurate. So realistically, it affects more than people know.
So what happened to Broadview in that case?
They didn't qualify.
Oh, interesting.
Right. So had their census count been higher, they could have counted. So you have areas that are considered hard to count. So HTCs, hard to count areas, are those that got a 73% participation rate or lower. And in the communities you have, so examples, Maywood, where I'm at, we only had a 69% participation rate. So for us specifically, that means that we missed out on about 10,000 residents. When you say that, you're like, how were 10,000 residents missed? Well, it's not that they missed, they just refused to complete the census. Now this time around is the first time it'll be digital, so you can do it from your phone, you can do it from your computer, you can do it from your tablet or laptop. Before it was this paper document, you had the census walkers walking around with clipboards, filling out papers. Well, this time, hopefully, they're hoping that the digital platform aspect of it will get more people engaged and involved. So when you think about that 10,000 number, though, the study showed that, each person counts for about over $15,000 over the next 10 years.
In federal money.
In federal funding. So again, when you're looking about your road, your infrastructure, education, social service, health care, those types of things. Maywood is one example. Over $160 million over the last 10 years in potential funding for different programs.
That wasn't there?
That was not accounted for, that we did not qualify for because we did not have the count that we needed. So when you look at Proviso Township overall, because we missed those nearly 50,000 residents according to the American Community Survey, that means that over $730 million
Throughout the township.
throughout the township was left on the table. When you calculate the entire map of the township, $730 million, things going towards education, infrastructure, healthcare, social services. And, people really just, when we're having these discussions, we're having these conversations, it's starting to hit home and resonate a little bit. You have the conversation, the hardest to count. Who would you think the hardest to count was?
Oh, well, certainly homeless people are the hardest to count, but after that, I don't know. You'll have to tell me.
Children 0 to 5.
Ah.
People will count the kids on the taxes, but won't count them on the census. So it's like those types of things. You'll sit there and you say, you're not taking the census. Your child is 5 now. So everything that happens over the next 10 years in this community, your child, it will become part of their culture. So if they see streets that need to be repaired, it'll be in their mind. I was raised on bad streets. If you have a poor education system, in their mind,
This is what becomes normal to them, right? This
you
is what they grew up
normalize
with.
everything that's missed out.
Right.
So you think the child that was 5 is now 15, they're a sophomore in high school, that has gone through their entire education process, seeing social service programming being cut, seeing education offerings being cut, seeing infrastructure not being built, seeing healthcare struggle. Why? Because 10 years ago,
They weren't counted. They hadn't been counted.
they
Through
hadn't
no
been
fault
counted.
of their own.
No,
but
I mean, no fault of their
Right.
own, but you think of what that does to the mental of a community and of a culture. For the next 10 years, this one count is going to affect us and going to affect our funding. And there's over 100 programs that are looking at this data to decide who's eligible, who's ineligible, where's this money going to go, how's it going to be moved.
Well, now that's interesting because, most people probably don't pay any attention to the survey, but even people like me who try to stay up with the news and figure out what's going on, I think of the census really in terms of a political representation, which is also true. The number of representatives in the U.S. House is determined by the census. The number of electoral votes the state has is determined by the census. But it's this on-the-ground level stuff that I find most fascinating, because even I'm not thinking really about that at that level. But you're right, this funding really affects people where they live.
Absolutely.
Right.
When you think about it from that standpoint, sometimes when you'll see the census commercial, we could lose representation. We might lose for the state of Illinois. We know we're going to lose a congressional seat based on how many people have moved out of the state over the last 10 years. But the conversation is, will we get enough counts to not miss 2? So when you think about it, if you lose 2 congressional seats, how many Senate seats then you lose?
Well, and each state gets 2, if we're talking about the U.S. Senate. But you're talking about like at the state level.
On the state level, yes.
State senators.
State
Yeah.
senators,
Right.
state representatives, they redraw this map based on census data. Cook County commissioners redraw their map based on this data. So when you think about that representation, but the regular everyday person is not thinking of, I lost my congressman, I'm still going to have a congressman. The map is just going to get redrawn.
Yeah.
But the average person is thinking about,
Schools.
they just closed that healthcare facility.
Roads, no one's patching the streets
That street's
here.
been raggedy for 15 years.
Yeah, the CTA overpass is, crumbling.
Because they redrew the map, they redrew my route to get to work.
Yeah.
Those are the things that we're basically trying to let people know it's a bigger thing than talking about government and bureaucracy and politics.
Yeah, because that doesn't, as you know, that doesn't really register with a lot of people. They're like, well, oh, gee, we lose a representative in the House of Representatives in Washington, big deal. Who cares? They don't look out for me anyway, or I never talk to the guy.
Crooked anyway. Yep.
Yeah, right. So
that is the conversation.
Yeah, so it's very abstract. But if you talk about, yeah, you know that CTA overpass at the end of your street, well, the federal dollars to repair that, we're not going to get them because people weren't counted, right? If they were, that overpass that's crumbling might have been, might have been repaired.
Yeah, I mean, even when you say that, you wanted early childhood feeding. So at the elementary schools, we wanted early childhood programming at every elementary school in the district, right? Well, that takes dollars and that takes actually data to showcase that there's a need for all of that. If you're not counting, how are you justifying that data? When you sit there and you say you want before and after school programming should have food for all of our youth. Well, the data will showcase that there's only a certain amount of youth that are lower income that need that funding and need assistance. But then it becomes unfair because then you think about it, who really didn't take the census?
Probably
Is it the medium household income person?
Probably not.
So
it's the low income, the people who need it most, and they're not being counted.
And that's how it becomes affected. When you think of what communities have the largest amount of immigrant, undocumented, or people who are not counted. So then you say, oh, no, everyone doesn't need a meal. Only 2 kids need a meal. Well, realistically, 5 kids needed that meal. So now, but what happened? Those 3 weren't counted.
Now, some of these programs are based on state level things. So, I mean, there are lots of programs that, for example, school
SNAP.
funding and
Let's go for SNAP.
yeah, or SNAP, but that's a federal program, right? Right. So, but school funding is based on state level state laws, which are based basically on property and property values. So that excuse me. So that's not really that's not controlled by the census. But
Isn't
there are,
it though? If you
well,
really,
is it? Tell me.
if you think about it from this standpoint, I'm just being honest, right? If you are the community that has a 80% turnout rate for votes when it's time for election season, and you're the community that has an 85% participation rate in the census, you want new roads. The community right next door to you has a 69% rate of participation for the census, and then they have a 20% turnout for election. But I can only give the road to one community.
Who's going to get it?
Who do you think's getting the road?
Yeah, that's pretty obvious, right?
So when you think about it, it's the unknown, it's the unspoken of thing, but the reality is it does affect it on a state level because that funding has to be allotted for in different areas.
So switching gears, what message do you carry? I mean, well, this is clearly a message, but how do you get the message out to the people who would otherwise not be counted? How do you find them? How do you reach them?
So Governor Pritzker announced that there would be $29 million in regards to funding going out for education and awareness. Of that education and awareness funding, about $3.5 million went to the western suburbs to get that information out. So you have each community, also through Cook County allotted for $4 million for census awareness to go out. So we have over $30 million going out census awareness. Those communities, each village has applied for funding from the Cook County for that funding that only goes on awareness and education of the census.
And who does the money go to? Does it go, so for example, in Maywood,
Sure.
would it go to the city hall, I mean, in Maywood, and the city government would then dispense it?
Nonprofits and community and the village officials.
Okay.
So look at it from this standpoint. Proviso Township applied for funding. We received funding from various agencies. We're using that funding to get the word out. The villages were able to apply for funding from Cook County. They receive funding. They are working in partnerships with different people to get that messaging out. Well, then also you have agencies like PLCCA, Proviso Lighting Council for Community Action,
Right.
or you have PASO, West Suburban Action Project, that focuses on Latino. You have like Coalition for Spiritual Leadership that have applied for funding as well.
And
that are getting
so
that
all these
message out.
organizations are getting
All of
funding
these organizations
and
have.
applying
Monroe
it.
Foundation
Yeah.
has funding to get the messaging out. CETA, Community Economic Development Association, they have funding to get the messaging out. And all of this is coming from Cook County and state dollars, you know, and the states, you know, multiple different states are putting funding behind the census because of how we see on a federal side, no, the census isn't that important, so they've cut funding that normally would have been done for the census. So then that's when you had various governors step up and say, hey, our state's blue, we need to get counted, we're going to do this.
And so that's 39 million or 29 million that's coming from Springfield.
Yes.
Is that federal money or is the state kicking in money?
That's state kicking in money.
So it's all of that 29 is coming from the state?
That's state. So you have the federal income that still has the census bureaus. So we're working with census partnership specialists. So we have, say for the Chicago region for the census. The Chicago region for the census a couple of years ago would count like maybe 2 other states. Like, and that region, the base hub would be the city of Chicago, and they'd work getting the census out. Now we're at about 7 states because of the funding reduction. So when the different governors looked at that and like, whoa, we used to have double the amount of boots on the ground for census. We used to have so many more commercials, so much more literature handouts, so much more swag to give out to people. We need to pump in some of our state funding, and that's what the governor did.
Okay, but only states that can do that are doing it. Right?
Yeah, I mean,
some states don't have 30 million to kick in.
Well, you know, unfortunately that is true as well. So then you rely more so on those in-kind people who just want to make sure that we're counted. We have plenty of people who are volunteering for the census and plenty of people who are willing to get that information out. You have partnerships with the libraries, with the park districts, with the clerk's office, with the different municipal officers, you know, nonprofit organizations, various different agencies, the softball team, the kickball team. Everybody, restaurants, everybody's stepping up because they realize there's been a shortage in federal funding, the census this time around, but they also realize, and I'm not sure how the census was counted. 2010, I was just getting out of college. I had just been laid off a couple of jobs. The census wasn't, and I just moved to a new state. So the census was not in my head.
Yes, right.
I was 4 months new to Atlanta, Georgia. Census what? Okay, whatever.
Nowhere in your field of vision, right.
So now looking at it, it's just like, whoa. This is a pretty big deal that people just don't grasp.
They don't, this discussion we've just been having, the people don't understand how it affects their daily lives, but it does, right? So before the show, you were talking also about some interesting ideas to, you know, have block parties, or have things to, you know, in areas where we think there's going to be undercounting, get people out to the block party.
The beautiful thing about the census this time going digital is prior to the census, there's a system called US Roam. So in any community, any person can Google this and find it. It's just the US Census Bureau Roam system. And
R-O-A-M?
R-O-A-M.
Right.
And when you go into the Roam system, you just put your zip code in and it'll show you the map of your area and what's the hard to count community. Is it the Latino? Is it the Caribbean? Is it the 0 to 5? Is it the senior? Is it the special needs? Or is it the families who don't have internet access? Is it the families who don't have a computer at home? It truly goes down to the nuts and bolts of what that specific area is hard to count. And it breaks it down by census tracts, not just, so say for overall the village of Maywood. That's great that you're counting the village of Maywood, but the village of Maywood has various maps drawn out that represent pieces of Bellwood, pieces of Melrose Park, pieces of Broadview, pieces of Forest Park.
And that would be the census tract,
That's
right?
the census tracts. So you have in Proviso Township of the 14 communities, you have 34 census tracts. And of those 34 census tracts, 14 of them are considered 73% or lower, which is hard to count.
Hard to count.
But each one of them hard to count aspect are totally different reasons as to why it's hard to count. So the beautiful thing about the funding and the resources and outreach is, you know, one area might respond well to the block parties and to getting that information out. Some areas might respond better to actually going door to door and having the conversations with your trusted voices. So then you have to do recruitment of asking the question of who are your true trusted voices. those are the different things that are happening. So we just had the big launch kickoff with our senator, Senator Lightford. We also had Representative Chris Welch and Commissioner Brandon Johnson representing, coming out to do a launch. And Bellwood and Broadview did a joint initiative to launch the census. And there was face painting, there was local vendors serving food, and there was the tables in the back where we were expressing different things about the census. And we just let the community know different information.
What kind of attendance did you get at that event?
Actually, it was on the day, like 2 Saturdays ago when it snowed really bad.
Oh,
there were over 200 residents that showed.
Really?
Yeah.
In bad weather? Not bad.
In bad weather, right? So, and the other things that we're doing, statistics in school. So there is information from pre-K all the way to 12th grade of different activities that students can be exposed to, because we all know, even if you are one of those families that come from lower income, or you come from different demographic or language barriers and whatnot, we know the kids are always going to be able to get to the parents. So it's called Statistics in School, and that provides information and activities to let kids understand the census on a more simplistic mentality and thought process.
And so this is something you give to the schools as part of the curriculum, like once a week or
Absolutely.
something. They might have 10 minutes on it or whatever, right?
You got it.
Okay.
I think about it, pre-shift. Let's, before we get into world history, students, let's do an activity. And they're thinking about what the activity is, but it sinks into, this is why the census is important.
Sure, and then, as you know, the kids go home and tell the parents. Gee,
Exactly.
guess what I learned in school today? Did you know?
Absolutely. So you have like the activity books, coloring books. We do different events at, like I said, at the library where we're bringing people in. And then also you don't have to recreate the wheel. There's always a parent and community meeting going on, right? There's always something going on at the church. There's also.
So all of this stuff that you've described sounds wonderful, but it seems like it takes a lot of people to make all this happen. So where are you finding the people
Teamwork
to do
makes
all
the
this?
dream work.
Yeah, yes, I agree with that, but
Yeah.
it just sounds labor intensive.
So what the Proviso Township decided to do early on, we did this back in June last year, was we put together a complete census count commission. And when putting together the complete census count commission, you were focused on who's going to sit on this commission. So it's a collective of 17 different areas of hard to count. So you think about it, we have people from healthcare, people from homeless, people from the Latino community, people from the Black community. You have people focused on Caribbean. You have people focused on sororities and fraternities. You have a big base on those. How do you get them engaged? You have government involved. And once you have church and you have faith-based organizations involved. And once you bring all of them to the table, then their job is to go out and do their various different subcommittees.
Who organized this commission of 17
representatives? Proviso Township did that.
The township government did that?
Yes. So, we have Commissioner Moore, Stanley Moore, for the Cook County, who is the head of the census. And he and I had a conversation with our great committeeman, Karen Yarbrough, in regards to how to best get the census out, because he is known as like the guru of census information. And he told us back in June, the first thing you guys need to do is start a commission. And we had various conversations with Commissioner Moore, and he let us know those things. So then from there, took a proposal to the township, presented at the township meeting. They wrote the ordinance and legislation to policy to make sure that it's instilled that there will be a census commission. And from there, we already knew kind of who the trusted voices are on the commission. So it's having conversations. Are you willing to commit to this over the next year to ensure the count is done?
So when did you start all this effort?
June last year.
June of last year?
Yeah.
June of 2019, right? So, yeah, I keep forgetting we're in a new year now, right?
Yeah. So we've been going about 7 months now.
Yeah.
And
what was your role in all of this?
I helped bring all of the 17 together. So I'm like the liaison for the township. So I'm actually not on the commission. I'm a liaison for the township to the commission, because they make all the financial choices of what we're investing in and what organizations that we're going to partner with and give the funding to. I was the one who would coordinate the meetings with the mayors and with their administration to have the conversations about not only Proviso Township, but your community specifically. So then from there, it just trickled down. Now I'm at the board meetings presenting. I'm at the school districts presenting. And it's really been just bringing everybody together, making sure that the communities understand. So now on a lower level, you'll have Bellwood that has a complete count committee, Maywood has a complete count committee, Forest Park has a complete count committee, Broadview, and so on. Because now they understand on a larger scale, Cook County has a committee, and that's great. Then Well, Illinois has one. Illinois Department of Human Services has one. Cook County has one. Proviso has one. Now each village has one. And that's where you'll get those bigger, like who are the trusted voices for your community? And how do we get the volunteers for your community?
And the well, when you say volunteers, are the people who would actually sign up for the census to actually go knocking on doors, or these are people who are trying to just spread the word?
So it's various ways that you can do it. Right now, the census is still hiring. And within Cook County as an area, you could earn well over $30 an hour just being a part-time or full-time participant based on the positions. I mean, they range, they definitely start in the 20s and range up to larger amounts based on, so they're still very much so in need of people. So if you know anybody, census.gov,
I may, in fact, yes.
uscensus.gov, and click on careers. It fill out the information. It takes a while for the background check to come through, but then when they start actually doing the door knocking after the count day, which is April 1st, that's when those people will really be up and running and making some additional money. But then you also have regular just volunteers.
When you say count day of April 1st, that's the day it starts, right?
Sure.
So how long does the count actually extend?
So you have March 2nd, March 12th, people will start take the census from the U.S. government in the mail. March 26th is actually the first day you can begin using the system to start responding. And then April 1st is a count day, meaning there's a big push. Make sure you're counted April 1st. Any child that's born after April 1st cannot be counted. If you move to a community after April 1st, you're not being counted you're not to be counted in that community. So April 1st is designated at the deadline of, on April 1st, where do you live? That is where you're counted. If you're a college student, that's where you're counted. If you live on campus in Florida, but you're about to come home on the 15th of April, guess what? Florida gets that count number because April 1st is where you are.
Even if, so for example, if you're registered to vote here, but you're at school in Florida, you still
Where
don't
do
get
you live
counted
April
here?
1st?
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then, so that'll go on through about the end of June. And, but they'll have the more foot soldiers on the ground. We'll be able to look into the system, and to the point we'll be able to see where the hot zones are and try to get that count up to as high as we can. But the cutoff pretty much happens in June, and then from that standpoint, they'll start doing the data collection. The U.S. Census Federal Bureau will do that last rounds of making sure the numbers are where they're supposed to be, and from there we'll get the count at some time.
And you, as one of these community organizers, do you get to see the totals as they're going to see whether or not certain historically undercounted areas are doing better this year?
We do get to see the maps of the different areas of, like, from what the self-responders are what they're called.
So even after April 1st, you guys can put some more effort on the ground and say, oh, this area is being neglected.
The state funding goes until June 30th.
Gotcha. Oh, okay.
Yeah. So the $29 million and the Cook County funding goes until June 30th. So we still have opportunity to do education and awareness to get that count out. Not necessarily saying in June they still want us knocking at doors, but still having events to get the information out and making sure that we're doing the best that we can.
So we got a little less than a minute left. So how do you want to wrap this up so the people watching this show will think, let's do it?
Okay. Well, best thing would be you can go to the U.S. Census website and learn information about that. They have plenty of literature that you can download in multiple different languages. Big thing for if you're a Proviso resident or if you're interested in helping with Proviso, it's provisocensus2020.com, which is the website that you should go to. There are plenty of resources there. You can sign up for our updates. We send out digital mail in regards to the census. You're welcome to come to any of the Census Commission meetings. We have a community calendar for every community of what's going on within the Proviso Township for census.
So it's provisocensus2020.com.
You got it.
Right. On that note, we're going to have to wrap up. Nathaniel, always a pleasure talking to you.
No,
we'll have to get you back again soon. So
whenever you're ready, I'm ready.
All right. Thanks.
Thank
it's
you.
always a pleasure. So stay right where you are. They're running the credits right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.